Happy to welcome everyone to the Dreamers Doers office hours with Emilia. So excited to have her here. We had, like I said, we had a great preparation call ahead of time. So the audience of folks who are going to be joining today are both from Dreamers Doers, as well as some folks were invited related to folks who are in Dreamers Doers, so people who might work with people who are in Dreamers Doers, as well as the invite list went out to WEST, which is my organization. It's a cross-company mentorship program for women in tech, and my mentors are both men and women, so we have a variety of folks who are going to be joining today, which is very exciting. So let me quickly introduce myself, and then we'll get right to it. So my name is Heidi Williams, and I have been in the tech industry also for a long time, 21 years, and recently left to start my company WEST, which, as I said, is a cross-company mentorship program supporting women in tech, specifically looking at women who are mid-career and how can we help them create thriving and exciting careers in tech in whatever way possible. So I'm really excited to be interviewing Emilia today. She is amazing. You saw in the intro that she is the CTO of LearnVest. LearnVest was recently acquired by Northwestern Mutual, so now she is also leading the enterprise architecture group and the client and planning experience engineering team there. So very excited to hear from her 15 years of experience in the industry and what she's learned along the way, what it's been like to be a CTO. So very, very exciting. Just roughly the format of the call is that I'm going to ask some questions of Emilia for about 20 minutes or so. Then we'll open it up to Q&A from the group for 20 minutes. And then in the last 5 or 10 minutes, it would be fun to just have everyone go around and introduce themselves so we can hear where everyone's coming from and what kinds of things, challenges, interesting things that they're doing. So we'll spend some time on that at the end. The call is being recorded. Not sure exactly how it gets distributed afterwards, but I'm sure it will at least get distributed on the Dreamers Doers list. So let's go ahead and get started. So Emilia, thank you for being here today. It's very exciting. Somehow you got muted again. Hold on, let me unmute you. There you go. Right. Try again.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. So, one of my first questions really is, did you start life as a CTO at LearnVest, or were you there from the very beginning, or did you come in because that role can be very different depending on whether you're the first?
No, that's a great question, actually. So I actually was not an engineer by background, unlike you, Heidi. We've been exchanging our backgrounds. But I come from the family of engineers and definitely sort of had that interest, and started out with solving a Y2K problem for Wall Street in the late 90s and early 2000s. And kind of got into technology, realized it's my passion, particularly interested not only solving complex technical problems, but also solving, building high-performing teams problems. And so I spent a decade on Wall Street building systems and websites, financial services sites, and building electronic trading systems, market data feeds. Ended up actually running and scaling a team for the third largest trading venue in the US. And after over a decade on Wall Street, I got very interested in the startup world. Wall Street is, leverages technology pretty well, at least better than I think life insurance companies or insurance companies. It's still very much, sometimes it's back of the house, not sort of like leading the way, and also highly regulated. So there's not a lot of innovation that can happen. So I was very interested in kind of looking at, what the startup world is doing. So I joined an advertising technology startup and kind of brought a little bit of like Wall Street discipline into kind of scaling a business and turning it around. Build a real-time bidding platform, and learned a lot in the advertising space of how to leverage massive amounts of data, and build also a data science team. I think ed tech is great at processing massive amounts of data, and so it's a very interesting kind of from a technical perspective of how you stream data, store data, glean insights from it. And then Alexa Van Tobel, the CEO of LearnVest, actually hounded me to join her. And some of you guys mentioned that you've heard of her, an incredibly passionate young woman who was dedicated to bringing financial planning to the masses. So brought me in around 3 years ago to help her take the company to the next level, to scale it, to take the team to the next level, scale out the platform. And as I joined, I got fortunate enough that Northwestern Mutual approached us with interest to acquire us. And it was an opportunity for us to take our financial planning software to 5 million users of Northwestern Mutual clients. And so really truly scale it and bring kind of financial planning fundamentals to financial security company. And so now I am not only leading technology for LearnVest, I'm also now head of enterprise architecture for a Fortune 100 company. So pretty exciting stuff. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, so fantastic, and such an amazing set of experiences. You've definitely seen a lot. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, you mentioned before that there was a CTO or a co-founder in this role when you came on board. And we had a question from one of the participants submitted ahead of time about things related to the culture, for example. And so it sounds like both you have the culture set by the previous co-founder in addition to making this shift from being maybe nimble and quick to needing to scale. So talk a little bit about that all of the culture shift and change that happened when you came on board.
Absolutely. I think I'm finding that that particular situation I was in is not unique. It's sort of every mature startup goes through that. Potentially someone who started the company and co-founded the company may not be the person who may want to or has interest or has the capability or desire to take it to the next level and become more of a sort of enterprise grade institution or become part of the larger institution, right? And so I was definitely brought in with the experience that I've ran larger teams. I've been sort of in a more enterprise context to take the company to the next level. What I've been, I think the transition for me was very well mapped out, because I think the founders of the company and the technical co-founder decided that it was a mutual decision that they wanted to bring someone from outside to take it to the next level. So the previous CTO actually had a direct kind of participation and hand in selecting me and ensuring that he was bringing someone in who's going to kind of carry his torch. And in fact, we are now incredibly close friends, and he's helped me through the process. So I think that happens rarely. This was done in a very graceful manner, where there was actually kind of an acknowledgement and understanding that we need potentially bring someone from outside for different reasons to kind of take us to the next level. But there was definitely sort of a buy-in from all sides to get that as smooth as possible, because as I mentioned before, startup is a very personal experience. You usually started out deep in the guts of some basement, and it comes out usually out of deeply personal experiences, especially if a company is very mission driven. And so, the first, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, these are highly emotional, deeply personal experiences, and they also bond people very closely, right? And so as you start bringing people from outside, this can be a highly disruptive process. If you're not being super thoughtful, if you're not being highly deliberate in how do you onboard the outsiders and what the expectations you set in terms of, what's needed, in terms of what's needed for to take the company to the next level, but also what do we want to do in terms of retaining the good parts of the culture.
Yeah, that's all amazing. I liked how you talked about being thoughtful and about both the expectations and really thinking not only about all the good things that are going to come with having someone new, but also being thoughtful and engaged with. You said that earlier that the team was very involved, not just the leadership team, but also the engineering team involved in getting to know you ahead of time and understanding the expectations of what were they asking you to come in and do in this role, so that there were no surprises about further changes that may happen. Yeah, interesting. And do you feel like there were changes to the culture that needed to happen? And you know, sort of.
I do, and I think I think you definitely want to keep the core of the culture, if there is a culture, right? If there's a strong, good culture, which of course you want to have. You definitely want to retain the good components of that. But sometimes, and we need to be also honest, especially as we're talking here in this venue with mostly female-centric sort of audience, is that startup culture sometimes is not the most inclusive. Sometimes it's not the healthiest in terms of the sort of work-life balance. And actually, that also, the sort of work-life balance is also one part that makes it not so inclusive, right? Whether you explicitly try to be very sort of diverse and inclusive. So yeah, there were some, one part in either of the startups that I came in to kind of scale were the culture of heroics. You know, the engineers had to like have, last minute massive production changes and having to have like all night deploys to push the code out to production and making sure nothing breaks. And so there was this sort of an incredibly hardworking culture, but sometimes maybe a little bit to the detriment of maybe mental and physical state of some of the engineers. And sometimes, especially on the younger side, the engineers may not realize this is happening, because it's also a somewhat a very exciting times, right? So you kind of get the adrenaline, and but also part of it is, of course, like it's not sustainable. And so, I think.
Hey, Margaret, my name is Ravi. I have an appointment at 5:30 p.m. today. And I'm wondering if you could anyway slide that when
yes. Hold on. Oops. Ravi,
can you mute yourself?
That's a good question. By the way, I should have.
Ravi, do you mind muting your phone? Let me see if I can do. Oh, I got it. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Emilia. Sorry about that.
No worries. So yes, I think, sort of hardworking culture, it works well maybe, and sometimes in the beginning. But again, if you're trying to kind of build a operationally strong and well thought out sort of platform, that's not sustainable, right? The all-nighters, or it's never a good idea for anyone, whether it's high school students or startup employees. So kind of deliberately slowing down and spending time and emphasizing the need for cleaning up the debt, technical debt, and being thoughtful about bringing best practices and automation and documentation for us to be able to make some of these deployments and code pushes in a more sustainable manner. As some of the examples that had to happen, just because it worked when the company was a smaller company, and it was some of the changes were far in between. But when you're growing dramatically and moving fast, it doesn't become sustainable.
And I have a question about that too, because I think it's interesting. You have to bring in new systems and new processes and set new expectations. And we didn't get a chance to talk about this before, but I'm sort of curious. I've definitely seen that although a culture may say we don't want heroics, we don't want to be in a situation where you have to be pushing code at midnight. Did you have to think about the reward and recognition system so that it's not accidentally rewarding the heroic behavior and accidentally perpetuating it? Did that have to change as well tell about how what is the behavior you recognize that you want repeated? Did you, was that something that came up at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I think it's very critical, especially in a smaller kind of team context. And even when I first joined these companies, they were still somewhat small. As a leader, it's very important to make clear and kind of even engage with the team and communicate properly, where again I revert to certain behaviors and I'm being very honest about where I think it doesn't work. So absolutely, I think being very thoughtful and celebrating victories of bringing more automation, bringing more sustainable engineering practices that can get us to rapid delivery, but without kind of continuous hacking and staying up all night, and emphasizing kind of best practices, but also helping, especially the younger teams with getting that done, right? And also being the person who can protect them from the business, from sales organization or marketing organization, or an incredibly passionate CEO who may not understand, if they are not technical, what it requires sometimes to make some of these changes. So as a leader, it's my job to kind of start articulating. I think sometimes even just articulating where the issues are, and on the one hand, protecting the team, but also empowering the team to be able to be vocal and sometimes saying, no, this may not happen. Also, again, getting the conversation started, how we should be more thoughtful and sustainable. I think that can go a long way.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and you started to touch on that there about there are business pressures which often require a startup to go super fast and not be thoughtful about architecture in the early days. Talk about how your role in CTO and how you sort of are that translation layer from engineers to business and business to engineers. And, and is that every part of the organization that needs translation, or did you focus on just sales, or just the CEO?
No, I absolutely, I think, of course, companies take on the character of their founders. And often, if a founder is not a technical founder, or if a founder is a technical founder, right? There's certain things, there's certain characteristics that the teams take on, that the companies take on. If you're a technical company, sometimes the emphasis of strong engineering, and sometimes over engineering, takes place without understanding the value of the business, or the value of just getting maybe a quick and dirty MVP out, right? Because just like anyone, engineers like to geek out on their profession and have fun with it, right? And so that kind of balance is also very critical to bring in the perspective of the business. Sales is here to help us move forward, to get us new clients, to get us more money, really, as a company scales. So it's on us as leaders to communicate to our teams why it's important. Of course, sales, for instance, and technology are different types of personalities, right? One is highly sort of analytical and very much has probably big BS filters, and whereas like sales have to be very sort of sometimes be very optimistic and very sort of sometimes paint a rosy picture that can be quite to the contrary of sort of engineering opinion. But I think, again, as leaders, we need to bring the two sides together, because ultimately we are working towards one goal, which is basically scaling and building a sustainable business. And so kind of translating from either side and explaining, why it's important to have a sustainable, thoughtful salesmanship organization, and why is it we are here to provide a high-level service for them, and we need to understand their needs. And sometimes even send engineer to sales calls for them to be able to appreciate what they have to deal with. But there's definitely the other side of the coin where, and I personally struggled with this myself, where you have, a highly sales-oriented executives or, senior members of the team or any kind of member of the team that's very good at kind of putting together beautiful, shiny slides, whether in a sales presentation or anywhere else. There's a very complex technical reality that's not reflected there. And that's actually pretty far from the sort of ability of the engineering teams to be able to effectively execute. And so how do you articulate these complex technical realities? And how do you explain that, if you forego some of the important things that you need to do on the technical side, that you will end up paying a serious debt later on. And it will affect your either growth or ability to scale or ability to retain your talent. And so that becomes very critical to be able to sort of continuously translate that to the business. And as a technical person myself, I constantly struggle with that because we engineers ultimately have to translate everything to zeros and ones. And we know in our minds how complex these things are and what it takes to do that. But when someone presents something that's absolutely shiny and beautiful, in our mind, it's, totally breaks our minds. It happens to me. It's sometimes emotionally, it becomes hard to actually articulate why it is so. And actually taking time and training your engineers how to do that effectively. And actually having enough discipline to continuously do it myself is important.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I feel like that piece is so critical. And I love that you actually get engineers out there on sales calls and talking to customers. I've always wanted to make t-shirts for my engineers that say, I am not the customer, because you really have to remember that you're not the end user of the software very often. And you need to put yourself in someone else's shoes to really understand what pain they go through, what problem you're trying to solve for them. So that's awesome that you're connecting that. And the opposite is true also. I think, like you said, there's always the big sales deal and, it's our biggest deal ever. And can't we just put a hack in the software to make sure that we can get this $1 million or whatever? And it's very hard everyone wants the company to do well. It's hard to say no to those. But I think if you're, when you're giving trade-offs to people and saying, well, we could do this, but then we have this other thing that may not happen, or this implication later on where we can't do the next thing. Yeah,
and I find that also, I think engineers are often kind of put in a tough spot where they always have to give the deadline, they always have to give the timelines, they always have to explain why can't certain things be done faster. They're always in a position where they're being asked by someone else who actually doesn't understand what it takes, for them to be able to deliver, and hopefully sooner and better. So, and that actually brings up another interesting point that I hope that other participants will find interesting is estimation. How do you estimate? And it's always such a struggle. It's art and science. I can tell you, I still struggle with that. I can tell you, absolute majority of my teams struggle with that, because again, when someone corners you and asks you, I think a very natural human response is to be positive, and so, and also, and to please, because there's always a sort of a push, to kind of deliver things. And so, training engineers in the rigors of estimation, and kind of pairing them up with more senior mentors and tech leads and people who've been around the block, being able to kind of walk them through of different possibilities and scenarios. Sometimes, you absolutely know that you're going to have to, do some figuring out some bugs in your code. And that takes a long time, and you can't predict how long that's going to take. So, think about potentially padding your estimates. And absolutely often the challenges, especially in this agile world, which I love the idea of ability to kind of quickly push code out in an agile manner and kind of iterate over it. But often often, when you're running consumer sites or enterprise systems, just a little MVP may not work. You want to have something more workable, and then you find yourself in a position that you don't get very detailed specs, and all this sort of edge cases. So again, it's engineers who have to kind of figure them out. So taking your time in, first of all, as a founder, understanding what it takes to build software, I think will go a long way for you to kind of speak the same language with your engineers. But then also, as you're scaling your teams, taking the time to teach your younger staff, and taking time to kind of be very thoughtful about estimation and explaining to your product teams that how missing out on one edge case can absolutely delay the delivery of a product. I think that's a very important part of our craft.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, everyone always wants it yesterday, of course. So that's great. And there was actually an interesting question. I think you've sort of mentioned it a couple times about, someone had asked a question about a recent tweet that said, don't spend your seed round on hiring a CTO. It's up to you as a founder to find a co-founder who is technical, so that, like you said, that you don't end up that you may end up with a more balanced organization built out because you have a balance between the co-founders, one technical, one business. So what are your thoughts on that, about how important is it to have a technical co-founder to partner with a business co-founder?
I think it's important. I think it's definitely potentially doable without one, because there's just so much infrastructure these days in terms of ability to be able to hire consultants and offshore people and onshore people, go to Upwork or Elance, and there's like talent from around the world, or TopTal, which has actually 10x engineers. Mm-hmm. But I think, again, we're all living in electronic reality, and most of us are starting businesses that are highly technical. Mm-hmm. And not having a highly technical understanding as part of your sort of company's beginnings can basically cost you much more later on. Mm-hmm. So technology is hard. I like to say that, engineers can be salesmen, engineers can be product people, engineers can be CEOs of massive companies, but not all these people can be engineers. Engineering is a hard thing. It requires great talent. It requires, strong analytical mind, but also understanding of the landscape. And if you're venturing yourself into a technical world, it only makes sense to have a partner who understands that and speaks that language, because one way or another, you will have to pay for that. Mm-hmm. If you don't.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up my set of questions that I had, and I would love to open it up to the audience. If folks don't remember what they were going to ask, let me know, and I can definitely. So I'm going to unmute everyone at the moment. Feel free, if you have background noise, to mute yourself again. But if you do have a question, feel free to speak up. I know I saw one, Marta. We did talk about Gabrielle's question. Nina had a question. Ravi and Mayank both had a question. So Marta, do you want to go?
I don't remember which question did I send. Do you have
yes, you asked how can you scale with only one developer? So I'm assuming you're talking about technical scale, but you might also be talking about organizational scale.
Yeah, I admire a lot LearnVest, but I don't know, that I would like to know Emilia's opinion of what would she do if you have to start from scratch, because, for example, in my case, I'm working in a startup, and at some point we had 2 developers, but now we only have 1. So I do as CTO, product manager, product designer. So yeah, very, very small team. So I don't know how would you take this startup to the next level with these resources?
It's a great question.
No, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, we all start, we have to start somewhere. And I think I know it's not easy to be alone or a couple of you trying to, keep at it and build something that users want. But I think it's also an exhilarating experience to be there at the ground floor, and have a very, very, very immediate and direct impact on literally every aspect of your product delivery. And so this is something that you actually should appreciate, because when you grow up and you have a larger team, it becomes harder to be sort of very much an integral part of every process or every facet of your startup. And I do think that even with one technical sort of either co-founder or engineer, and depends of course on their skills and their interest and commitment, there's a lot that can be done. I mean, if this is a full stack engineer who understands how to build is a good hacker who kind of understands how to build and deploy systems and build products from ground up, whatever framework they use, you can go very, very far with that. The amazing thing is these days there's just so many amazing frameworks, tools, tool sets, cloud infrastructure, third-party software as a service components, where you don't have to write every part of your code. You can go out and leverage third-party systems to kind of and build your Legos of a business. So these days it's much easier to start a business with a one helper. And of course, I think you have to continue testing and iterating and seeing what works, what doesn't. And then of course, if you see that, as you get to a point where you feel like you have something interesting where it will interest investors or angel investors, then you go out and kind of get the money to be able to scale.
I think there's an interesting question too. I had an opportunity to mentor some startups yesterday, and many of them, if they're not technical founders, they don't even know how to evaluate talent or how do you hire that first one. And Marta, it sounds like you are technical if you're also the CTO and playing that role at your company, but it'd be interesting to, can you leverage your network in some way to help you find the right person, the right talent, someone who may be technical but also have leadership skills that can help build a team around them, so that it's not on you to hire 5 engineers, it's on you to hire some sort of technical leadership that can then help build the team beyond that and figure out how to do the next hire and the next evaluation. Yeah,
and also let's not underestimate sort of the power of the network or networking. And these days, and I know sometimes some of us may not be the most extroverted people to go out there and exchange information. But the startup world these days is so connected and interconnected, and every day there's just so many events. You can go sign up and desk at WeWork, and all of a sudden you're opening yourself up to an amazing network of people. You can go to meetups where all you see is engineers who've been around the block. So don't underestimate the power of networking and asking questions and sort of gleaning insights and getting help from peer startuppers who've done this before and can give you advice.
Thank you so much.
Great. And Nina, your question was, I scooped your question, which was about the tweet. Did we answer that question, or did you have further follow-ons about the sort of when do you hire a CTO and should you use seed money or find the person yourself?
Yeah, I think I was more interested in, how to, maybe this isn't exactly relevant, but I think she answered it really well. And I was also interested in knowing how to position myself as capable of managing technical co-founders or technical talent to those investors. Because, if I've never had one, what makes them think that I can go out and hire one and have, a functional team? Yeah.
No, that's so that's an interesting question. So are you saying that you would like to get funding first before you go out and hire someone, right?
Yeah, and to clarify, I do have my working product out there. It's more than an MVP. It's launched, it has tons of users. And so now I'm looking to hire a core developer to enhance the product and our offerings.
No, I think investors always appreciate sort of the initiative. I think the initiative, desire to learn and actually getting something out there is sometimes worth much more than potentially technical knowledge, right?
Right.
You know, there's lots of engineers or CTOs out there who've, went out and can build and scale teams and build technologies. There's not too many people who can actually build a product from ground up and get users, and sort of get organic growth. So I think, you speak for yourself with your actions, and sort of your ability to deliver will also reflect incredibly well on you as the investors look into that. I think ability to, one thing I like to say to my engineers is that always ship, meaning like always deliver product, right? Because you can have the most brilliant engineer and can code the most elegant solutions, but if a product is not out there and a new feature is not out there, you're not worth much to me. And so, Nina, by the fact that you've been able to build a product that actually has traction is an incredibly valuable thing that will get a lot of respect for you from investors.
Okay, that's very reassuring.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think too, again, like when you are evaluating people who might want to join you, certainly check references. And if you don't know exactly what questions to ask to validate their experiences and their skills, enlist the help of someone who can help you do those references. So, figure out what questions do you want to ask, not just about their technical skills, but also their teamwork or their determination or their ability to admit mistakes and have humility. And actually, humility is Emilia's word. We're going to come back to that in a minute. I have one more question for her. So I think, enlisting. So then when you go to the investors and say, well, I did reference checks and here is what I really did my due diligence about this person by leveraging my network who may have more technical depth than you do. And that will go a long way too. Okay,
thank you.
Cool. And I think, let's see, I think the last two questions were from folks who actually are not on the call at the moment. They may be worth answering anyway. And I actually think we talked about one of them, which was the engineering and sales relationship. And I think we talked about that one quite a bit. And actually the other one as well. So how to change the culture of an existing organization one inherits. So I think we did cover most of those questions. So are there other questions from folks on the call, things that Emilia talked about already that you want to dig into a little further, or topics we didn't cover that you're interested in? Feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Anything from Sasha or Gabrielle? Oops, hold on. Let me, let me unmute everyone again, just so we have it. So Sasha or Gabrielle, any questions from you?
No, I'm just listening right now.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well, I just wanted to, let's do last sort of top thoughts or tips and tricks or advice from Emilia, and then we'll go into introductions to, which I know it's funny to do that at the end, but I think it's cool to sort of circle back and hear what everyone is working on. So, Emilia, last thoughts or pieces of advice that you want to leave folks with?
I think don't doubt yourself. Start it. I think once you start, amazing things happen. You end up in a good place. You end up being lucky at the right place at the right time. To be at the right place at the right time, you need to start sometime. So I just want to encourage you to start. And as you start, you're going to be learning. You're going to be meeting. You're going to be making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. Don't be afraid to learn from mistakes and don't get discouraged. But it's great to see young ladies here on this call, even taking the time to take this call and sort of curious and interested. So keep up the good work.
Awesome.